and it's fascinating that you point out Atlanta is escaping the Civil War and creating something of whole cloth new, and yet here we have, at the same time, we're looking at people like Du Bois, we have Margaret Mitchell, and we have the creation of the ultimate Southern story with all of its mythological qualities and bigger-than-life qualities of Gone with the Wind. And now, Atlanta entering into the early 20th century becomes, before too long, the representation of the antebellum South and the Civil War. And once we're into the 30s and we have the film, then the destruction of Atlanta gets immortalized in a way that it hadn't been. What do you make of that twist, that the city that escapes the Civil War then in the process of that, in the process of it being a New South cultural center, also then becomes the emblem of the Civil War at the same time?
Well, it continues into our own time. I think this, how people understand what the war meant, and certainly Gone with the Wind offers a representation of the destruction of Atlanta and the Civil War that is very powerful in the American psyche. It's reinforced by earlier, the Birth of a Nation. Certainly, it is a very powerful hold in the American psyche in terms of understanding what the war meant, what reunion meant, and there's a kind of logic and beauty to the fact that it is in Atlanta. That here's Margaret Mitchell, and the film is being largely produced in Atlanta, but also there's so much of Atlanta in it. What it represents and what people think it means. But here in 1935, Du Bois publishes. He's not given up, and he's publishing Black Reconstruction, the last chapter of which basically directly takes on the mythic qualities of what Mitchell is representing.
But many folks may not realize that Black Reconstruction, as powerful a book it is, largely goes unheralded for generations.
Absolutely.
Before it becomes rediscovered. So he doesn't give up, but he's not heard.
He's not heard, right? Yeah. And certainly in terms of the popular psyche, in this popular understanding, which is, after all, that's where it is today as well. There's a real disjunction between the historian's understanding of the past and the meaning of the Civil War. Quite clearly, there's a strong consensus in terms of what that is right now. But in terms of the Mitchell version is still out there. Let's face it. There's still an ongoing struggle that I'd like to think sort of originated with Atlanta. In a sense, the sort of choices and alternatives that Atlanta was not representing.
Well, and here in your work, you've given us an opportunity to add context to Margaret Mitchell's creation of Gone with the Wind that we wouldn't otherwise have, where Black Reconstruction was missed by many generations of white and blacks. When we look at the creation of Atlanta, we can see that there is this other story that is very important to it. Well, I think today it's fair to say Atlanta is perhaps the center of Black cultural America.
Right.
And the return, we have the Great Migration, we have African Americans abandoning the South. Well, that's not happening anymore. Now they're coming back, and they're often coming right back to Atlanta. And so there's an interesting closure to the Margaret Mitchell idea. Although, as you say, as much as we write against that mythology continues to persist in the popular culture in ways that confound us.
Well, we have the 150th anniversary of Sherman's conquest of Atlanta, and I think the city of Atlanta itself is going about it very differently than they did during the 100th anniversary. And my understanding now is that as we see it unfold, which will unfold during 2014, there'll be very different sort of treatment of the war. So in a sense, we may come back full circle to what you're talking about.
Well, we'll have to look forward to that and see what happens. That's interesting. I want to thank you very much for coming in and talking with us today. I want to tell our folks that this is Atlanta, Cradle of the New South. It's out. It's available. It's a great read. You need to pick it up and take a look. And thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it.